Good morning, everyone. So, last class of immunology, we are discussing disorders of immune system. In the last three classes, we have discussed fundamentals and hypersensitivity reactions. For today's class, we are going to deal with another set of immunological disorders called as autoimmune disorders, with a special example of SLE, that is systemic lupus erythematosus. Let's begin this chapter. So, what is autoimmunity first? Let us understand this concept. Normally, your body should react to things that are foreign to your body, but it is not supposed to act against your own body, isn't it? Our immune system should react only against foreign antigens. It is not supposed to attack our own tissue antigens. This is what we call it as self-tolerance, that is, we tolerate ourselves. How does the immune system knows the difference between our own antigens and the foreign antigens? They are literally educated in the thymus. During the development of lymphocytes, all the lymphocytes, they have to pass through this very big university called as thymus. In the thymus, all the representative antigens of your entire body are presented over there. You can imagine thymus as like an apartment where every flat is having a bulb in that. Okay, like every organ system, it will show up their antigen sample over there. Your skin, your kidney, your eyes, everything, every antigen will be showed up in the thymus. So every student which passes through that antigen, through that university, thymus university, they will just go through every apartment block. They will get familiarized with each and every type of antigen that is possible in your body, and they will try to tolerate that antigens, and only the cells which have passed the exam of self-tolerance will be released into the blood circulation. This is how our immune system is taught about self-antigens. Okay, but sometimes what will happen is this education system is not that perfect. So what will happen? Few lymphocytes which are reacting even against our self-antigens, sometimes they can escape into the circulation. Okay, so if it is combined with other factors like human, our gene, what you call it as susceptibility of our genes, and few environmental factors combined with non-self-tolerant lymphocytes, all these three factors will come together and they will produce a disease that we call it as autoimmune disorder. So autoimmunity, it results from loss of self-tolerance. We are actually supposed to live in a perfect harmony with our own cells by educating our immune system that okay, this is my own body, this is my own antigen, I should not attack that, teaching it the common sense. But when the teaching it fails, sometimes it fails, these cells, they will escape into the circulation, and now they are a potential danger for your body. When this potential danger is coupled with susceptible genes and proper environmental triggers, the triad will lead to development of a disorder called as autoimmune disorders. Okay. How this education of immune system is happening is, actually there are two steps in this. There is something called as central tolerance and there is something called as peripheral tolerance. Okay, immature T cells, when they are going through the thymus, all the process I told you before, when it recognizes self antigen, that T cells or B cells, they will be eliminated from the circulation usually. These T cells, they will be eliminated by a process called as negative selection. They are no longer allowed into the circulation. Okay, and B lymphocytes, what they do is they will edit the receptors of B lymphocytes so that it will no longer identify the antigen. We know antigen receptors, they are very specific. right? So once you just edit some changes, if you introduce some changes in the receptor, it will become altogether a new receptor and it will not recognize the antigen, right? So just by inducing some editing things to the B lymphocyte receptor, they will be thrown into the circulation. This is how the central tolerance is created. If the T cells or B cells, if they escape this barricade, this central tolerance barricade, and they jump into the peripheral circulation, so now they are harmful. So we have got a few other techniques through which these cells, they will be rendered harmless. Either this will happen either by causing them anergy. Anergy means extreme loss of energy. Even though a self-reactive B cell or T cell, when it comes into contact with your self-antigen, circumstances, it will force it to be anergic lymphocyte. So usually there should be secretion of some cytokines so that the cell is activated and it can do its work. There will be absolutely no secretion of these cytokines, so the cell is not activated. Okay, and the second mechanism is suppression by regulatory T cells. There are a set of T cells called as regulatory T cells, which are actually the policemen, which orchestrate all the immunological responses. They will regulate the immune system. If at all a regulatory T cell, it comes in contact with a T cell which is self-reactive, it will suppress that T cell or B cell. Or these cells, they will be deleted by apoptosis. They will self-induced, what you call it, suicide of the cell. They will just feel worthless and they will start apoptosing themselves. They will just die. So these are the two levels by which central tolerance and peripheral tolerance are managed. Okay. But sometimes what will happen? These T cells or B cells, they will escape these two sets of regulatory mechanisms and they will just spill into the circulation. That's when your autoimmune disorders come into picture. So just mere presence of self-reactive T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes is not enough for an autoimmune disorder to develop. The person should be carrying certain genes which facilitates the development of the disorder. How that is, that will happen, we will discuss now. And there should be proper environmental triggers also. Okay, so the triad of self-reactive lymphocytes coupled with susceptibility genes and proper environmental triggers, everything will lead to autoimmune disorder development. So these autoimmune disorders, they can be systemic autoimmune disorders, or they can be organ specific autoimmune disorders also. Systemic disorders means these disorders are present and they are involving virtually every system of your body. Organ specific ones are, they are contained to one organ. For example, if you take autoimmune hemolytic anemia, self antigens are limited to blood cells. They are not present in your other tissues. So whatever autoreactive cells are coming, they will attack only hematological system and they will destroy the RBCs, forming into autoimmune hemolytic anemias. But if the antigens, if the self-reactive cells are attacking every antigen in your body, then the disease, it becomes systemic, isn't it? It can virtually, or these cells, they can virtually attack any type of cell in your body. They will go attack your kidneys, they will go attack your liver, GIT, skin, what not. Every system is affected here. That we call them as systemic autoimmune disorders. The best prototypical example for this autoimmune disorders is systemic lupus erythematosus, that we will be discussing for today's class. So systemic lupus erythematosus, what the information that we get from this title? Systemic, so it is involving multiple organ systems, and there is erythematosus. It stands for a rash, an erythematous rash on the skin, which is usually seen in association with SLE. So SLE is named after as it is affecting multiple organ systems, we call them as systemic, and erythematosus stands for a characteristic skin rash. Don't ask me what is lupus. Lupus usually refers to wolf-like. It refers to wolf usually. Maybe the skin changes that might be resembling wolf bites. That's why they have named it as systemic lupus erythematosus. Okay, right. So SLE is characteristically an autoimmune disorder, and it affects women more than men, to an extent that women is to men ratio is around 9:1, and it is usually a disorder of younger childbearing age group, young women 20 to 30 years of age. So the classical presentation of an SLE is usually a young female childbearing age presenting with fever and multiple organ system symptoms which are non-specific, and she is having a rash, characteristic rash. This is how the usual presentation of SLE. Okay, so we know that in autoimmune disorders there should be some autoantibodies that are produced against some antigens. In SLE, the antigen substance is nuclear antigens. So every cell will have its cytoplasm and the nucleus. Nucleus, the fragments of the nucleus, they act as antigen stimulator in SLE. You should remember this point. And antibodies are formed against various these nuclear antigens. So in the nucleus you have got DNA, and in the cytoplasm you have got several RNA, and several histone proteins are there, and even nucleolar proteins are there in the cell, isn't it? So when antibodies are produced, they are produced against all these components. If it is produced against DNA, we call it as antibodies to DNA. If it is against histone proteins, we call it as antibodies against histone proteins. If it is against RNA, antibodies to RNA, and antibodies to nucleolar antigens. So all these things we call them under a common name called as anti-nuclear antibodies, also known as ANAs. Okay, right. So the fundamental defect here is failure of the mechanism that maintains self-tolerance. So even if there is a exposure of cells, exposure of nuclear antigens to the immune system, our immune system is usually, it is not supposed to identify this antigen, isn't it? So everywhere in the body some or other cell is being damaged daily, on daily basis, isn't it? But usually we don't develop any detectable immunological response against that antigen, because we know that antigen, that particular antigen is our own antigen, and we are not supposed to act against that. Our immune system has got that common sense. But in patients where there is this lack of self-tolerance, our self-antigen, they will trigger an immunological reaction. Okay, so these antigen, they will start acting like a foreign antigen, and they will start the production of antibodies. Those antibodies, we call them as autoantibodies. This is the pathogenetic fundamental of SLEs. So these antigen and antibody complexes, now as they are formed, they can cause tissue damage. Remember your concepts from type T and type 2 hypersensitivity reactions. If the antigen is located on the cell surface or on the extracellular matrix, type 2 hypersensitivity reactions happen, and they lead to tissue damage. Am I not correct? And if the antigen antibody complexes are formed in the circulation, they will get deposited in the blood vessels where there is a pressure gradient, isn't it? There also they will activate the complement system, leading to destruction of the tissues. See, the interesting concept you should observe here is both type 2 as well as type 3 hypersensitivity reactions are causing tissue damage in SLE. Okay, everything is because of antigen antibody complex formation only. Antigen antibody complex formation, it will lead to complement system activation, which further leads to production of C3A, 4A, 5A, which acts as anaphylatoxins, and as well as chemotoxins, which invite inflammation into the tissue site, leading to inflammation followed by tissue destruction. This is the whole pathogenetic mechanism. Alright? Right. So I told you there should be some immunological factors, genetic factors, and environmental factors in the triangle of pathogenesis, right? Genetic factors like certain MHC genes, they are more prone for people carrying certain kind of MHC genes. They are more prone for development of these autoimmune disorders. Okay, and studies have concluded that not only MHC but also another few other non-MHC genes, they can also lead to development of autoimmune disorders. Then immunological factors, we already discussed this point. So the cells which have lost the self-tolerance, the escaped cells which have escaped the central tolerance and peripheral tolerance, they can identify the self-antigens. And environmental factors, like the cell damage is usually caused by certain external factors like UV light and some drugs, and few genders, they are more prone to go into the surrounding environment, so they can get more insults from the environment, like men, right? So all these factors, they play a role together to lead to development of autoimmune disorders. These genetic factors like MHC genes and non-MHC genes, how do they actually affect is, the persons who are carrying these genes, they are more prone to develop self-reactive T lymphocytes. Not only that, when an antigen is expelled into the surrounding tissue, it is usually should be cleared by our immune system, right? But this antigen clearance is delayed in few people. Few people carrying certain types of MHC genes. So there is presence of self-reactive T cells are there, which is now coupled with defective clearing of the antigen from the tissue. So it is like a festival. There is a increased amount of antigen that is present over there, and there is the dangerous cells that are there. So there will be an increased chance of interaction between these two things, which further leads to inflammation. Look at the picture. So on the left side of the screen, you are seeing susceptibility genes, which is leading to production of autoreactive B cells and T lymphocytes, isn't it? On the right side, you can see which is an epithelial cell, we can guess it as, which is being attacked by UV radiation, and as a result of that, it is disintegrating. Okay, as a result of this disintegration, nuclear antigens are now exposed. Not only they are exposed, there is a delay in the clearance of these nuclear antigens, which leads to interaction between the effector cells and these antigens, leading to the production of autoreactive antibodies, which further leads to production of inflammation. Okay, right. So in SLE, there are several systems are involved. Okay, almost virtually every system, organ system in your body is involved. But for diagnostic purposes, at least 4 systems should be involved in SLE. So the most common system that is involved is hematological systems, and arthritis is also a very common system that is involved. Joints, all the joints, non-erosive arthritis is a common phenomenon you see in SLE. So the other systems that can be involved here are skin, lungs, heart, gastrointestinal system, and even the brain. Okay, and they will show some constitutional symptoms like fever, fatigue, and weight loss. These are non-specific. Okay, so let us see the morphology. If it is involvement of kidney in SLE, can be classified into 6 types depending upon the extent of the injury. Class 1 is minimal mesangial lupus nephritis. Class 2 is mesangial-proliferative lupus nephritis. 3 is focal lupus nephritis. 4 is diffuse lupus nephritis. 5 is membranous lupus nephritis. 6 is advanced sclerosing lupus nephritis. Not only the glomerular but also tubulointerstitial lesions are also common in kidney involvement. Okay. So coming to the clinical features and diagnosis, we have already discussed this. Usually the typical presentation is childbearing age woman with malar rash, and she presents with fever, weight loss, other non-specific symptoms, and symptoms that are involving multiple organ systems. At least 4 symptoms are necessary for the diagnosis of SLE. And diagnosis of SLE is not completely based on clinical scenario. Support from serological evidence is also necessary. Okay, but unfortunately the disease progression is quite unpredictable, and the prognosis usually depends on the severity of the disease. Okay, and it is highly variable. That is about SLE. So the second topic for today's discussion is amyloidosis. So amyloidosis, it is actually various clinical disorders that are put under one single umbrella. Okay, now let's talk about amyloidosis. So amyloidosis means there is deposition of a substance called as amyloid in various tissues under different clinical settings. So the common denominator in all these clinical settings is deposition of a substance called as amyloid in various tissues. Then we call it as amyloidosis. What is this amyloid then? Amyloid is a misfolded protein which is aggregated to form a structure called as a fibril. Just remember this for now. So amyloid is a substance which is composed of misfolded proteins which aggregate together and they form a fibril. Okay, so usually in our body several kinds of proteins are being produced on a second basis, isn't it? So many types of proteins are produced at every moment. Sometimes what happens here is the produced proteins, usually they should fold into their primary structure or secondary structure or tertiary structures. If you recollect your biochemistry, when the proteins are formed, they should be folded in a specific manner. So in order for them to do their job, just a single chain of amino acids, it doesn't account as a protein. It has to be folded in a specific manner, so it gains its primary structure or secondary structure or tertiary structure, and then it is a functional protein, isn't it? When this folding is happening, sometimes what can happen is a misfolding can happen. Okay, under normal circumstances, these misfolded proteins, they will be digested into small pieces by enzymes called as proteases. These proteases, they will come and they will just eat up all the misfolded proteins. But in some people or under certain circumstances, these misfolded proteins, they are not cleared from our tissue. And not only they are not being cleared, now they will assume a specific configuration so that it will become difficult for these protease enzymes to digest that. They will attain a specific configuration. They will attain a special structure so that it is now resistant to degradation by proteases. Once it is resistant to degradation by proteases, the substance, it starts accumulating. Obviously, it is not cleared from the tissue systems, right? Once that mass is present in the tissues, it will cause atrophy of the cells. Once atrophy starts, the organ, it will become dysfunctional. That is how an amyloid can lead to disease progression. Okay, so amyloid is a substance which is getting accumulated. It is biochemically it is composed of a misfolded protein which are aggregated into a special format called as a fibrillary proteins. Because of this their special configuration, they are resistant to degradation. That's all. Okay. One special feature about this amyloid proteins is amyloid protein can be a result of several kinds of proteins. What I am trying to say here is, morphologically, all the misfolded proteins which are forming into fibrils, morphologically they all look similar. They have the special structure that I am talking about. It is essentially similar in all these misfolded proteins. But if you analyze them at a biochemical level, they are all different proteins. Okay. In Telugu, we can call it as Bhinnatvamlo Ekatvam, right? They are composed of different kinds of proteins, but morphologically they are very much similar. Okay, so depending on that, we classify amyloid into 3 major forms are there, and few minor forms are also there, and they get deposited through different mechanisms. Whatever is the amyloid, there are certain physical properties are there. In its biochemical composition, amyloid is composed of 95% of fibrillary proteins and 5% it is composed of a P component. Okay, 95% it is composed of fibrillary protein. These fibrils they are continuous fibrils and they are non-branching fibrils. The diameter of these fibrils is around 7.5 to 10 nanometers in size. And this point you should remember, there is cross beta pleated sheet configuration. The special morphological configuration of amyloid is cross beta pleated sheet conformation. Okay, and because of this cross pleated, it is like folding a paper into a sheet like things. Okay, it is cross pleated. Pleated means kuchillu, right? It is like a folded paper configuration. Because of this, the special properties of this staining with Congo red are possible. We'll be seeing that soon. So physically, it is a non-branching fibrils, diameter ranging from 7.5 to 10 nanometers, and it has got cross beta pleated sheet configuration. And chemically, it is composed 95% of the time, 95% it is composed of fibrillary protein, and the rest of the 5% is composed of component called as P component. Coming to common forms of amyloid, there are 3 major forms. I already told you. One is AL, second one is AA, and the third one is A beta protein. Okay, AL is composed of amyloid light chain. L stands for light chains. Light chains are immunoglobulin light chains. These AL deposition is seen in cases of monoclonal gammopathies or neoplasms of plasma cells. Plasma cells, we know they produce immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins, they have light chains and heavy chains. In some plasma cell neoplasms, there is increased production of these light chains. These light chains, they tend to aggregate and they form an amyloid. That amyloid we call it as AL amyloid. That is amyloid composed of light chains. And then we have AA type of amyloid. This is a non-immunoglobulin protein, and this protein is usually synthesized by liver under chronic inflammatory states. Okay, and biochemically, if you analyze that, the protein, it is not an immunoglobulin protein. Okay, and then we have A beta protein. It is also called as amyloid precursor protein. This is specifically seen in Alzheimer's disease. And the other forms of amyloid are TTR, beta 2 microglobulin, etc. are there. And the P substance, the function of the P substance is it stabilizes all the fibrillary proteins. Okay, right, these are the common forms of amyloid. And coming to the pathogenetic mechanism, we have already discussed this. The misfolded proteins, usually they are supposed to be degraded by proteasomes, or extracellularly if they are present, they are supposed to be degraded by macrophages. In these people, this quality control mechanism is failed. So what will happen? These misfolded proteins, they tend to accumulate. And coming to the classification of the amyloidosis, based on the extent of distribution, amyloidosis is classified into systemic amyloidosis and local amyloidosis. Based on the cause of amyloidosis, they are classified into primary amyloidosis and secondary amyloidosis. Primary amyloidosis is nothing but, here the problem is production of abnormal proteins. See, for proteins to get accumulated, there are two scenarios. One is a normal protein is produced, but a part of it is misfolded. So that will aggregate and form into amyloid. Or there is production which is happening at a higher rate. Misfolded proteins are produced at a higher rate. So when there is production of misfolded proteins at a higher rate, we call that as a primary amyloidosis. Okay, usually those scenarios that we see in plasma cell neoplasms. In secondary amyloidosis, what will happen? Under certain disease circumstances, increased amyloid deposition is seen. Amyloid deposition is not the primary cause here. The person is suffering from some other disease, and as a consequence of that disease, amyloid protein is deposited in him. Then we call it as secondary amyloidosis. Okay. The examples are hemodialysis associated amyloidosis, localized amyloidosis, endocrine amyloid, and amyloid of aging. These are all secondary amyloidosis. Morphologically, whenever an organ system is affected with amyloidosis, the organ is frequently enlarged in size. For naked eye, for a gross inspection, usually amyloid is not that apparent, okay, unless you put some Lugol iodine on that, it will stain blue in color, okay. But generally the tissue which has got amyloid deposition, it usually appears grey in color, and it has got that shiny waxy nature to the site, and it is usually firm in consistency. And if you take a section from that and if you see microscopically, you can see the amyloid deposition. Always remember, amyloid is always deposited in extracellular location and in between the cells. And it has got special staining characteristics, and the most common staining special stain that we use is Congo red. A amyloid which is stained with Congo red, if you observe it under ordinary light, it appears as a pink staining, and if you use polarized light, it shows apple green birefringes. This is very beautiful to see under microscope. Okay, apple green birefringence is because amyloid, if you remember the morphological characteristics, it is a pleated configuration. That means it has got that folds in that. All those folds, when you pass a light through them, they will show that birefringence. See the picture here, the right side of the monitor, you are seeing some apple green color is there. It is like a sun ray which is passing through the glass. Okay, it has got that diffusing property, that we call it as birefringence. On the right side, on the left side of the monitor, you can see dark pink deposition, that is amyloid deposition. And in different organ system, amyloid deposition, it can take certain forms. In kidney, usually amyloid, it will get deposited between the podocytes. Once the podocytes are damaged, that results in proteinuria. Okay, so amyloidosis of the kidney is the most common form of amyloidosis. Grossly, kidneys are usually can be of normal size and color, but in advanced cases, kidneys can appear shrunken in nature. And microscopically, if you see, amyloid is deposited primarily in the glomeruli, especially in between the podocytes, and it can be seen even in the peritubular tissues, arteries and arterioles also. See here, the pink material that we are seeing is, this is amyloid. In spleen, depending upon the location of amyloid deposition, there are two types of amyloid spleen are there. One is called as sago spleen, another one is called as Laudacious spleen. In sago spleen, the deposits are largely limited to splenic follicles. So they produce tapioca-like granules for gross inspection. See this picture? You can see granular texture of the spleen. This is what we call it as sago spleen. Here the amyloid is deposited in the splenic follicles. Instead of getting deposited in splenic follicles, if it gets deposited in the splenic sinuses, we see Laudacious spleen. Okay. So clinically, usually amyloid deposition is usually non-specific, and patient will present with generalized symptoms, non-specific symptoms like weakness, weight loss, lightheadedness, and sometimes syncope. If the renal system is involved, it leads to, as the podocytes are being damaged, it leads to proteinuria enough to cause a nephrotic syndrome. In heart, it leads to decreased elasticity of the heart, which can lead to congestive heart failure. It can also cause some conductory disturbances also, which leads to arrhythmias. And if it gets deposited in the tongue, it can lead to enlargement of the tongue, and it leads to speech insufficiency. And in blood vessels, if it's getting deposited, it leads to vascular fragility that can lead to bleeding. Diagnosis of amyloidosis, it depends on histological confirmation of amyloid presence. Physical presence of amyloid should be confirmed histologically, and the prognosis is generally poor. This is about amyloidosis. So with this, we are concluding immunology chapter. So in immunology chapter, we have covered the basics, and we learnt about different types of hypersensitivity reactions 1 to 4, and we learnt about autoimmune disorders, and the last we learnt about amyloidosis. Okay, thank you.